All right, good morning, everybody. Here we are at the last lesson in the Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon. And I want to tell you, I'm glad of that. You may have enjoyed this, and I probably would have enjoyed it more if I hadn't been the one trying to do the teaching. But to me, it's been a very hard task to get that done. So I've whined enough now. Let's go on and start the lesson today. I tell you, we've had a busy week around our house. I'm still trying to overcome this knee surgery, and it's getting a lot better, thank goodness. I got off the rollator today. I'm on a crutch now, or a walking stick, and that's better. If I just don't fall, and my sheriff's making sure that I take care of myself. But yesterday, she went to the doctor and had a spell with her blood pressure. It went sky high. And she came home sick from that and doesn't feel well today. We were not able to come to church last night, go to church, because I didn't want to leave her, and I hadn't been driving. Today's the first day I've driven, and only because she's not able to drive it. She wouldn't have done this otherwise. But you pray for us, and we're in this recess of trying to get better. And I trust we will, and thank God for his grace and mercy during these times. Now, today, our lesson is titled Relational Foundation. I believe that's the right term. Relationship and relational investments. Now, let's just think about our life in stages. When we're, in our early teens, we don't have many things we're investing our life in at that time. Maybe we have an investment in trying to get through school and college, etc., like that. But then when we get out of college, we have an investment in trying to get a good job and perhaps getting married, buying a home, those kind of things is uppermost in our mind at that time. And then we get a little older than that, we make different kinds of investments then. We begin to think about that day's coming when we're going to retire. And so many people don't make plans for that and depend on Social Security, and I tell you, you'll starve to death if you don't do better than that, unless you've been putting some money aside and investing it somewhere or other. And I'm glad that we did that years ago to help us in the times when we're not going to be able to work any longer and our income has been cut way back. So at that time of life, maybe 30s or 40s, particularly by 40 you ought to be you start investing in your future, retirement, incomes, those kind of things. So as we go through our life, the relationships we have with life differ. And that's the interesting thing. That's kind of the overriding thought about this text today and this message today. So I want to get in it if we can today, and let's look at what we're going to do. First of all, let's explore the text. Now, if you read this and you think that she is just talking about this in front of people, I don't think that's right. From what I studied, it seems to be that she is, excuse me, in a dream. She's dreaming all of this. And it makes more sense to me if you understand it as a dream rather than just an experience that she had personally. Now let's look at verse 6, first of all. Open to my love, but my love had turned and gone away. My heart sank because he had left. I sought him, but I did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer. And in verse 7, the guards who go about the city found me. They beat and wounded me. They took my cloak from me, the guardians of the wall. Now, this to me, I think, is a dream. And she's looking back and recalling another dream in which she looked for her love, who was now her husband. They're married at this time now. And she wanted him and needed him, but he wasn't there. And her heart broke over his apparent mysterious and sudden departure. Now you see, if that had been a wide awake thing and it was an experience happening in the now, she would have understood where he was at perhaps and all that. But this was a dream, and everything is not told to her in that dream. She doesn't know where he's gone, why he left, where he's at. And she's panicking in this dream. And she said she did not find him. Now that's tragic, isn't it? Have you ever lost someone? Have you ever lost a family member? I don't mean death, but just, you couldn't find them. They weren't where they normally are at this time of day or night. And you begin to panic a little bit as you wonder, what happened to them? Where are they? I didn't know they were going anywhere, blah, 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 blah. And you get upset. And so perhaps you then try to go out and find where that person you love and concerned about is. Well, that's what's going on with her in her dream here. She's trying to find out where he went. And the dream painted a picture of a spouse who felt as she had been deserted. And boy, that's got to be a tragic experience to feel that your spouse has deserted you. Now, I've dealt with many couples over my ministry that have been deserted by their spouse. And maybe it wasn't as abrupt as that, but nonetheless, they deserted them at some point. And it's a real tragedy when that happens. And it causes a lot of pain and hurt in the life of those who have been left behind due to divorce or whatever. And that's what it looks like here. She felt she had been left by herself in a sense that he wasn't physically there. Now, you know, the good thing about marriage is generally we are physically with one another. Now, not 24/7, of course, but most of the time if we're not with each other, we know where the other one's at, don't we? If I leave the house and Mary and I are not together, I always say I'm going to the church, I'm going to the hospital, nursing home, etc., etc., etc. I let her know where I'm going to be, and she does the same with me. If she's going to town to shop or going to the doctor or whatever it might be, she lets me know too. We are responsible to do that for each of our spouses. And yet it didn't seem to happen in this relationship right here. His continued physical departure left a pile-on of sadness in her heart, not only because he physically wasn't there, but he emotionally wasn't there to support her either. And that's an important thing about marriage. We have to give emotional support to each other. That's very important, because there are times in a marriage that either one of us are going to be down emotionally. And we need the security and the encouragement of our mate when that happens. And that's what she's talking about here. She needed a physical presence, and she needed an emotional support also. And so if you've got that, you can look forward and be in a relationship that's going to be mutually fulfilling. But if you don't have that, then one or both of you are going to feel abandoned. And that's a terrible thing to do. And so that's what the woman in this dream is talking about, the wife of Solomon. Now in verse 7, she describes here what next happened to the woman, continues to give the impression again that she's dreaming. In reality, she married Solomon, the king of Israel. I mean, that's about as high as you could get at that time, wasn't it? And for that reason, she probably would not have been mistreated by the guards. I doubt very seriously that that was a real event there when she said they beat her. Now, you know the king would not put up with that for his wife to be beaten by the guards. And so that's another reason that scholars think that this is a dream and not a reality experience. And going on with this, though, she encountered those guards as she went through the city in search of her true love. And she also had an encounter with guards in a dream before she had married also, back in chapter 3. In her telling of the dream she had after the wedding, she described the cruelty of the guards. Once they found her, what did they do? They didn't try to help her. In fact, it was just the opposite. They beat her, leaving her with painful wounds. And then they took her cloak away from her. Can you imagine that now? Can you imagine somebody doing that, particularly to the king's wife? And that's the reason most people think that it was a dream. Now, the beating she endured probably served as a figurative way to describe her intense emotional pain that she felt over this mysterious disappearance, of her true love. The intense physical, emotional pain that she had, it really upset her. It really troubled her, and it just destroyed her emotionally. And being left alone without her husband broke her heart. Just broke her heart. You and I hopefully have never experienced that, but many people have experienced that. And yes, there's broken hearts. It's going to happen when that kind of thing takes place. Now, along with the wounds, the guardians exposed her to a painful kind of disgrace for a young woman back then. They took away her cloak. Now, what's the significance of that? Well, the garment that mattered quite a bit to her was this cloak. It covered her, and without it, she would be left exposed to the elements. In the day of the Old Testament, a woman covered herself with a cloak, a shawl, a veil, as a gesture of modesty as well as protection from the harsh sun. Now, if she didn't have that cloak, she was revealing that she wasn't protected in any way. And she wasn't a woman that was modest in her life. And so she was in a quandary here over all this. You can imagine how that must have felt. Now look at verse 8. Young women of Jerusalem, I charge you, if you find my love, tell him that I'm lovesick. What a poem, what a dream she's having here, isn't she? She expresses how she really feels and doesn't care who knows it. I like that. She's so in love with Solomon. That's all that matters to her. And she wants things to be proper and right between them. And I just think it's a tremendous dream that she had here. A tremendous experience of her love for him and him for her. And that's the way I would feel if Mary and I were divested of each other for some reason. Just somehow we were separated in a big crowd and couldn't find each other. Maybe in some kind of crisis in the world, like a tornado or a hurricane or something. But nonetheless, she expressed to her the painfulness that she felt. And she says she needs the help of the young women of Jerusalem. And she acknowledged her eagerness to rejoin her husband. And so she charged them with helping her find him and sending a message to him that she loved him. Now, the urgency of her plea suggests the depth of her desire to reconcile with him. If there was something that caused an irreconcilable problem, she wanted to fix it. She wanted to reconcile it, if that's what the problem was. And neither her wounded heart nor the torment she suffered at the hands of the guards could persuade her to give up on him. She wasn't ready to throw this marriage away or this love story away. And you got to express to us today, we got to say, boy, that's a tremendous woman here. A great lady who's much in love with her husband. And she'll do anything to put this marriage back where it was and to have this development of a relationship that she used to have. Neither her wounded heart nor the torment that she suffered at the hands of the guards could persuade her to give up on him. She was tenacious with her love for her loved one. And men and women, that's the way we ought to be towards our spouse, tenacious. Hold on with all that we have to that marriage and to express that love to each other. I don't know how you express that love to your wife, and I'm sure we all have our different ways and different words that express our love to each other, but certainly we should do that. And we should tell them often that we love them and hug them or whatever we need to do to express that. And we know what our spouse desires that makes them feel wanted and loved and appreciated. Now, 6 times in this chapter here, she referred to him as her love. Folks, that was a centerpiece of her life. That was everything to her. And there was nothing or nobody that could compare to him. Nothing. She had given herself completely to him, and her deep affection for him would not disintegrate. He was number one in her life. And everybody that knew her and him, they knew that. And so when they looked at her, they saw someone who was madly in love with her husband and vice versa. In other words, she said herself there in verse 8, tell him that I am lovesick. There have been a lot of songs over the years for those who are lovesick. Got the Lovesick Blues. You remember that one, that country hit? And there are many others out there express that fear or that feeling of love sickness. And that's exactly what she was and would only be cured by the return of her husband. That was the only thing that would cure her. I love this story. Now, you know, a marriage can get into trouble when spouses are distant from each other emotionally, even though they may be present physically. There are homes that the marriage is destroyed, and there's no emotional love there, no emotional bind there on that family anymore. That's tragic. They may be living in the same house, but it's cold, it's lifeless, it's fractious at best. There's no love there. You can't have a home without love. You may live in the same house, but folks, you ain't got a home if there's no love in that home between you. And we need to understand that today. And it causes trouble in our marriage when we're emotionally distant from one another. And a painful cry of this woman sheds light on the need that we have as couples to work at their marriage relationship by being present for each other. That's so important today, and I hope you gather that. You have to be present for each other in life. You have to put that marriage first. You can't be absent from that marriage and live with someone else or live for someone else or go out and play the field, as they say. You can't do that. You're committed to one person, and that person is committed to you, and that's where it must stay. And that's the reason it was such a painful experience for her. And so marriages will get in trouble. It's not a matter of can they. They will get in trouble if there's emotional distance in between the two. Being intentional about being there for each other makes the marriage stronger. You have to have that intentional love, that intentional togetherness. And if you don't have that, friend, you need to work on your marriage today. I'm telling you right now, it needs work. We don't need to take each other for granted and just accept who we are and go on with it. No, we've got to take each other at the value they are to us. And if someone is married to each other, or we are married to each other, then there's an intense value we place on each other. And that ought to be expressed to our spouse in various ways, I believe. And so marriages are going to get into trouble when spouses are distant from each other emotionally, even though they may be present physically. How is your emotional relationship with your spouse? That's a question only you can answer. Do you have a good emotional relationship? You understand when you're married, you can sense what's going on in each other's life. You know it. And so you need to have that emotional antenna up all the time to see what's going on in your spouse's life. Are they going through times of difficulty and problems or whatever? You need to be as sensitive to that because they need that, particularly women. They need to know that you're emotionally involved with them. And it's not just a piece of paper that says you're married. Your heart says you're married also. Now, look, first of all, we talked about here the cry for companionship. I believe that there are a lot of people that are lonely in life. I talked to an old friend of mine this morning. I think he's 90, 91, somewhere in there. He recently remarried after several years his wife had passed away. His son and I were roommates in college many, many years ago and became best friends and have been ever since then. He lives in Jackson, Mississippi now, retired from the full-time ministry, but he's a minister to senior adults in his church there, a large church in Brandon area of Hines County. And his dad and mom just treated me like I was their own son as we were together in college. And I just loved them just like they were my own parents. And I can't imagine him being alone because he was such an outgoing person, such a loving, giving person. And he loved me unquestionably. And I loved he and his wife that way too. And we've just been a close relationship. And I think back on that relationship and I would have missed something if I hadn't got to know them. I would have missed something. They wouldn't have missed much not knowing me, but boy, would I have missed a lot. A wonderful friendship that's lasted all of these years. And through trying times with health and other things, it's been there. And that's the way it ought to be in marriage. We ought not to be alone, and even though we're married. Now, that's ridiculous, isn't it? The good thing about marriage is that we're not alone, that we have somebody to talk to and to unburden our hearts with and can listen to us and understand what's going on in our life. To me, that's a valid part of marriage. And I'm sure it is to you too. Don't ever let your marriage dwindle to the place you're not even talking with each other. Get over it, whatever it is. Get it settled and get back on a communication line again because you need it as well as your spouse needs it. Now let's look at verse 9, if you will, here for just a moment. I'll be right there with you. We'll look. Verse 9, what makes the one you love better than another? That's a good question, isn't it? What is it? You know, we all see things in others that we love. And we come to love them for those things that we check on them. The things that we'd want in a spouse. The things we love about them. Their humor or their endearment to you. Their sensitivity. Whatever it is. Their honesty. Whatever it is. Certainly you may be attracted to them, first of all, because of their appearance. But then it goes much deeper than that. And it has to if your marriage is going to survive. And so the writer says, what makes the one you love better than another? most beautiful of women? What makes him better than another that you would give us this charge? What makes him better? You know, maybe there were those around him and said, yeah, well, he may be the king, but that don't make him better than my husband. You know, yes, he may be rich and wealthy and the wisest man who ever lived, but he's got his faults too. But now she didn't look at him that way. She saw him as a very distinct individual, very worthy of her love, and she was proud of who he was. Now, we would expect the women of Jerusalem to carry out the woman's order. And that kind of response would have been in keeping with their role in the poem so far. But instead of commendating her, look what they did. They asked her to tell them why her true love was better than any other man. Now, you know, women, what would you say about your husband? If someone asked you, why is George, or why is Ken, or Casey, or Josh, or whoever, why are they better than any other man? Well, it may be something that you would not believe would even count. It may be something very silly, you know, to you. But to them, it touched a chord in their heart, and they loved them dearly because of that. Maybe it's the way they value their wife, and maybe it's the way he does little things for her and brings her flowers or cards or whatever. But that's what makes it better. And so with their question, a valid issue to be addressed in marriage relationship is brought to light. And it's important. I want you to get this now. It's very important. The young women of Jerusalem have appeared at strategic moments throughout the poem. At the outset of the poem, the woman introduced herself to them in chapter 1 and verse 5. And she urged them 3 times to wait until the right time before they awakened love. Special attention had been given to decorating Solomon's carriage for the wedding day. And the young women of Jerusalem had lovingly woven the cloth that covered the couch in chapter 3 and verse 10. And the woman asked the young women to send a message to her true love in chapter 5 and verse 8. And she shared with them that her true love was also her friend. Now, there you go, right there, to me. Let me tell you the most important thing about my marriage. I guess I could say, maybe another time I would say something else. But the most important part of my marriage that stands out to me, and I believe to my wife, Mary, also, is we are friends. We are friends through thick and thin. Do we ever get upset with each other, aggravate? Of course we do. Do I ever get on her nerve? Well, you know I would never do that. Sure I do. Does she ever get on mine? Yes, she does. But you know what keeps this marriage valid? Is we're the best of friends. We first got married, I told her one time, I said, you are my best friend. She didn't like that. She thought that was a terrible thing to say. I was supposed to be her love, not her best friend. But over the years, she realized how valuable that is, and she's heard other people say that, and she's on board with that now completely, and I am her best friend. And I'm going to tell you something, as my best friend, I'm not going to let anyone or anything get between me and my best friend. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to always take her side. I'm going to always defend her. I'm always going to encourage her. And I'm always going to brag on her. Anything and everything it means being my friend and my being a friend to her, that's what I want to do. Now, we've been married a long time now. Probably longer than some of you are old. And yet, that friendship has bonded and got deeper with the years that's gone by. And I honestly cannot imagine my life without her being in it. And I wouldn't want to. I hope I never have to experience that. And yet one of us will probably, in all likelihood, die before the other. Well, I hope it's me. First of all, because I don't want to be friendless. And second of all, I think women can handle that better than men can being alone. But she is my best friend in every sense of the word. Whatever to you it means, that's what it means to me, being best friend. Now let's go on and look at this a little more. They decorated the carriage, and they'd lovingly woven the cloth, and she asked them to send a message that her true love was also her friend. What a message. Now, almost always, the young women of Jerusalem responded by listening or assisting the woman. In this verse, however, alone, they did something very different. This is what they did to her. They replied by asking her a probing question that would prompt her to spend some time in reflection. Reflecting on her answer would require her to go back to the day when she met him and a time they have spent together since. Now, if you came to me today and said, why is it that you and Mary have such a good relationship? Why is it that you're such good friends? Well, it's not because I'm such a good friend. It's not that I don't mess up and hurt her feelings at times, regretfully, and maybe anger her at times, regretfully. But she knows deep down that I'm her friend, and she can count on me. And she'd look back over our many years of life and marriage together, and she would come to the conclusion, I love him because he loves me. He is a friend to me in every sense of the word since the day we met. And that would probably take her back to our wedding day and the nights that followed that. But most likely, it would direct her to the moment in which she devoted herself to him alone. Her exclusive commitment to him galvanized, now listen to this, galvanized her unwavering love for him that took the shape of a lasting investment in their marriage. You see, when we are in love with one another, we're going to invest in that love. I guarantee you we are. We're going to do everything we can to make that love valuable to her. And then she in turn is going to love me that way and give herself to me. That's the proof of friendship. A total giving of oneself to another. Now, yes, I'm talking physically, but I'm also talking about every other way also. Give herself to me and me to her as the best of friends, as people who love to be around one another and enjoy one another and accept the things about us that's not what we wish we were. We all have difficulties. We're all not 100% perfect in our friendship with each other, but we know we love one another. And so she is unwaveringly committed to my love, and I am unwaveringly committed to her love. That's where it's at, and that's going to be that way until the day we die. Now, the question raised by the young women of Jerusalem needs to be taken seriously today by people. What makes a wife certain that her husband is better than another? What would you say to that question about your husband? Well, by the same token, what prompts a husband to believe that his wife rises above any other woman? Are there not other women and other men out there who have the same characteristics as we do? Of course there is. Of course there is. There are other women, other men out there just as kind and gentle and sweet and understanding and patient and what all you want to name. But there's even there's an unknown quality in there somewhere. Somehow our hearts get in tune with one another, and it prompts us to believe that we are the person that they want to be with. And so the answer to that question is only answered in the bedrock commitments that we make to each other. And we keep making those commitments over and over and over again. We make them when one is sick and the other one tends to that other one, that spouse. We make it when one has lost parents, or we're having trouble with children, or whatever it is, loss of job and esteem. And we're there to pick them up and to dust them off and to say, but I love you. I don't care what people say. I don't care what's happened. It's not going to change the fact you may have lost your job, but you have not lost me, dear girl. You may have been wounded by someone else. Someone else may have talked vile and vicious about you. But I defend you, and I don't believe that. I love you. And folks, that's important to understand when others that we love are hurt or wounded in some way. Well, a husband and wife need to make a commitment to each other, and that commitment serves as the foundation of the couple's relationship. Accordingly, the strength of the marriage depends on the willingness of that couple to invest in those commitments. What have you invested in your marriage? If you're not invested much, you're not going to get much return, I can tell you for sure. And there's going to be a wedge in your marriage. It's going to grow deeper and deeper and wider, and eventually that marriage is going to be tanked. Every once in a while I hear about someone who's been married for 40 or 50 years even, and they get a divorce. And I say, my goodness, how did they live together that long if there was no love that could sustain that marriage, no commitment? I don't see how you could do it. Somehow or another, there was not an investment made in that marriage as it should have been. And that's what's important to you and I today. We have to invest in our marriage. It's a investment that pays great dividends. Don't ever forget that. If you're married 40 years, 50 years, 30 years, whatever, you've got to keep investing in that marriage each day. It's the little things you do that will be the investments you make to make a marriage valid and good. Now, the vows repeated on the wedding day serve as much more than just a ceremonial thing that have little more than sentimental value. Vows are statements that the couple will make investments in their marriage as long as they live. Will you take this woman to be your lawful wedded wife as long as you both shall live, etc., etc.? You are making an investment when you say that. You're saying to your spouse-to-be, I'm going to invest my life in yours. I'm going to pitch my tent with you, and I'm going to invest it every day in our marriage because I love you. You're my best friend. You are my wife. You're my husband. And I want to make every investment that will increase the value of our marriage. Now, you can do that, men, and you can do it pretty easily, too, if you'll just stick to it. Don't take her for granted. Did you hear that? Don't take your wife for granted. Well, she's been doing this, blah, 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 blah. I don't know why she shouldn't keep doing it. No, don't appreciate what she does. Appreciate that she cooks your meals and washes your clothes and cleans your house. And she should appreciate that you get up every day and you go to work and you work hard and maybe you have another job and you're a good father and she needs to appreciate that. And you have a winsome way with your children. They love you and you love them and you spend time with her. You hold her up in the world as your wonderful wife. And you need to let folks know that that's true too. You cannot expect someone else to give the emotional support to your wife that you are to give. That's God-given. You are the one to do that. You're the one to cherish her and honor her and lift her up every day. That's what it's all about right there. And you're to do that the rest of your life. And those vows are investments that you're going to make every day. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do today is make that investment every day of your life in your wife. Now, the central commitment in marriage for Christian couples involves a mutual devotion to the Lord. Now, I don't know, I kind of wish in a way that it started off saying that. If we are not devoted to the Lord, friend, I'm telling you, you're going to be hard put to have a great marriage. You may have a good marriage. You may never have any problem. It may go on and on and on till you die, and it'd be a great marriage. But I'm telling you, that doesn't change the fact that your first priority is your devotion to the Lord. It ought to be a mutual devotion. It's sad when you see men come to church without wives or wives go to church without their husbands. It's sad. And that goes back to we marrying someone who's not what you are. You're a Christian, you live for God, the other one don't. And what are you going to do after you're married? You're going to make the best of it. That's what you're going to do. And pray for that spouse that maybe they'll come to the Lord. And so when you've got a joint loyalty to God, then you're going to continue to grow in your love for each other. And you're wise enough to focus on growing in your love for God at the same time. For years, we did our devotions separately. I always get up every morning, I do my devotion. The first early part of the day, I just do that. It's my time. The phones don't ring, nobody calls. I'm just in my office by myself with my devotional books and my Bible, and I'm praying, and I'm doing that. And then at night, we started praying. I did. And I made a statement. I said, we're going to start doing a devotion together from now on. You're talking about hard. It was hard to do to begin with. It was awkward. Right? You think as long as we've been married, that wouldn't be a deal, but it was. And we both felt awkward praying out loud while the others there listened. We read a devotion spot every night, usually David Jeremiah's devotion book every year we get. and then we comment on that maybe, and then we pray for different ones and add others to our list and take some off, and we have a good time in that devotion. Now, it's not always Pentecostal, it's not always revival, but I go to bed at night thinking what a joy it is to pray with my wife, and for her to pray with me, and I hear what's on her heart and how she lifts me up, and I do the same thing. I try to lift her up and let her know that she's a valuable commodity, if you want to put it that way, a valuable part of my life. If you don't pray with your wife, if you don't pray with your husband, I urge you to start doing that. It's not going to be easy to start with, but within 30 days, I'm telling you, you'll miss it if you don't do it. And sometimes we do miss a night or two, and I always dread that when we do. Maybe we have company that night or something like that, or we're out with someone and get in late, whatever, but we'll miss a time or two. And I don't ever like to do that because I enjoy that. And God speaks to our hearts through those devotion times and through the reading of Scripture and what's on our hearts that we share with each other. So, focus on growing in God's love for each other. Express that love for God with each other. And don't let your emotional response grow dead. Make it valuable to you. The kind of love that runs the risk of diminishing over time and perhaps even disappearing altogether is a kind of love that is not emotional. You know, it would be no good. I could write a treatise on love and never touch the subject of loving my wife and give it to her and say, here, I just want to know I love you. But there's not one word in that about her and how I feel about her. I may talk about the love I have for God, the love I have for the creation, the church, and the people and all. But listen, if I'm writing a treatise on love, I need to start with the Lord first and then my love for her. And you think she'd be impressed with that paper I wrote to her and her name wasn't even mentioned? Never once did it say, I love you, Mary? Of course not. That would be a travesty of love, wouldn't it? It would be of no value whatsoever. Now, so when you talk to your wife, you tell her you love her. You let her know you love her. I'm sorry. Every time I get in this chair, I think he puts pepper in here or something because my nose starts itching. Now, all of us are going to have challenges in marriage. So the way to make your marriage strong is to keep love at the foundation of it and let it be expressed in every way you can. Now, let's move fast here in verses 10 and forward. My love is fit and strong, notable among 10,000. His head is purest gold, his hair is wavy and black as a raven. His eyes are like doves beside flowing streams, washed in milk and set like jewels. The woman declared to the young women of Jerusalem that she loved a man, and she demonstrated her love with her eagerness to find him. She went on to tell them what she saw in him, and she started with the way he looked, and she considered him to be fit and strong. In her eyes, he was extremely handsome, and I don't doubt that he was. But she also added he was an outstanding man who distinguished himself among 10,000 other men. Then starting from his head, she painted a picture of him with words selected from a heart full of love. Head that gleamed like purest gold, implied he was probably tanned well, and his hair was wavy and black, gave the indication he was robust and energetic, not weak or weary. She provided a number of rich details that she talked about his eyes, and it gave the impression that she probably lost herself in his eyes many times. She compared his eyes with doves, birds that symbolize tranquility and gentleness and peace. And doves look particularly peaceful as they perched near flowing streams, and they gave every evidence that they were alert to what was going on around them. And so by saying that his eyes had been washed in milk, she was referring to the white of his eyes, and those white added to the color of his pupils. Every time she took a long look at his face and gazed into his beautiful eyes, she thought they looked like precious jewels that had been set perfectly in a ring or a necklace. She has colored him in words. And it's a beautiful picture that she's colored him in. Now she goes on in verses 13 through 16. His cheeks are like beds of spice, mounds of perfume. His lips are lilies, dripping with flowing myrrh. His arms are rods of gold set with beryl. His body is an ivory panel covered with lapis lazuli, I don't know. His legs are alabaster pillars set on pedestals of pure gold. His presence is like Lebanon, as majestic as the cedars. His mouth is sweetness. He is absolutely desirable. How about that? This is my love, and this is my friend, young women of Jerusalem. Well, we're out of time, but I love that statement. Absolutely desirable. And just as important to her was that he was not only desirable, he was her true friend. And she honored their friendship as much as she relished their romance. She would be there for him as she knew he was going to be there for her. Amen. What a love story, huh? What a love story. Father, thank you for this, that we can see how we are to be with you and to be with our spouses and to love them as you've taught us to, Father. Let us be faithful to that friendship, that love, that marriage. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. God bless.